First ballot Hall of Famer Bob Feller never got a win in the World Series, and a lot of people point to this blown call on a pickoff as why. In Game 1 of the 1948 World Series, Johnny Saint Bob Feller were in the midst of a great pitching duel with nothing but zeros on the board through 7. But in the bottom of the 8th, the Boston Braves began to rally. Bill Salkeld walked, and he was pinch ran for by Phil Massey, who was bunted to second. Eddie Stanky was intentionally walked, then pitcher Johnny Saint would line out for the second out. And the controversy comes when Feller would try to pick off Phil Massey at second as Hall of Famer Lou Boudreau was cutting in. And though he was out, later confirmed by photos, umpire Bill Stewart ruled him safe. And that became noteworthy as Tommy Holmes would hit a single to drive him in and take a 1-0 lead. If Massey was called out, the inning would have ended there. But it did not, and the Braves would win the game 1-0. Feller got another chance at Game 5 to close out the series, but he was not good, giving up 7 over 6.1 as he would take the loss, with an 0-2 career World Series record with a 5.02 ERA. But in the end, the Indians won the series in 6 games. Really what kept this call from being more controversial, though it was the blemish on Feller's gem and what is Cleveland's most recent title. Our next one involves the always controversial baseline rules in the 1969 World Series. The 1969 Mets are called the Miracle Mets after their first 7 years as a franchise saw them finish in either next to last or last. But everything would change in 69 when they won 100 games. They beat the Braves in the NLCS, and despite the 100 wins, they were huge underdogs against the powerhouse Orioles, who won 109 games. But the amazing Mets proved they belong by winning 2 straight after losing Game 1. And the important Game 4 saw Tom Seaver in a battle with Mike Cuellar and the Orioles bullpen, seeing Seaver give up 1 through 10. And the bottom of the 10 started with a Jerry Grove double, and Al Weiss was intentionally walked. J.C. Martin's job was to bunt them over, and he laid a perfect one down. Pete Richard would gather, and he threw the first, and it hit Martin the wrist, and allowed Grove to score the winning run. The controversy comes from the fact that Martin was running inside the first base line, and appeared to hinder Richard's ability to make a good throw to Davey Johnson. And according to Rule 6.05, Martin should have been out, and the runner should have returned. But the umpires did not see it that way. The Mets were still in great position to win this game regardless, but it was a play that gave the Mets huge momentum as they would go on to win their first World Series the next night. Plays that seemed to happen for teams on a miracle run. Our next play also involves the Orioles the next year, with a real example of the ump getting in the way. This was the start of the Big Red Machine, but the Orioles were still in the midst of their dynasty. But in Game 1, the Reds took an early 3-0 lead, but the Orioles would tie it by the 5th inning. The Reds began to rally in the 6th, putting runners on the corners with 1 out. And umpire Ken Burkhart ran out in front of the plate to judge if it was fair, with assumptions that Elrod Hendricks was throwing to first, but he actually got in the way of Bernie Carbo's pass to the plate, causing a 3-man collision, and when the umpire got up, he would call Carbo out, even though Hendricks tagged Carbo with his glove and the ball was in his bare hand. Obviously the umpire not seeing this, as to this day, Hendricks never tagged Carbo, and Carbo never touched home. The Orioles would win this game by 1, making the call more impactful and seeming to set the tone of the series as the Orioles won in 5 games. The Reds continued to be a powerhouse for the mid-70s as they're involved in another similar play in 1975. The Reds and Red Sox split the first 2 games of one of the greatest World Series of all time, and Game 3 was another tight game as the Red Sox would come back from a 5-1 deficit to send things to extra innings. The Reds got their leadoff runner on to start the 10th, and pinch hitter Ed Armbruster was tasked to bunt, and his bunt was a high chopper in front of the plate that seemed to confuse him. He froze for a moment, and this caused him to get in the way of Carlton Fisk's path, who still made a nice play, but he would airmail the throw at his second into center, putting runners on the corners. Fisk and Darrell Johnson argued that Armbruster interfered, seemingly not intentional. Either way, Larry Burnett ruled otherwise. Then 3 batters later, Hall of Famer Joe Morgan would hit a walk-off single. The Reds would go on to win this great series in 7 games, and if things ended different here, and the Red Sox were then able to pull out a win, Carlton Fisk walk-off home run in Game 6 would have ended the series and the curse. But instead, fans had to wait a few more decades. The Reds dominated the National League for most of the 70s, but it was the Phillies and Dodgers who were often there at the end of the decade, with the next call from the NLCS meeting in 1977. They split the first 2 games, and in a 5-game series, that of course meant Game 3 was huge. And going to the 9th, the Phillies were up 5-3, and they got the first 2. But after a single and a double that bounced off Greg Luzinski's glove, that turned into a 3-base hit on a throwing error, Davey Lopes hit a hard grounder that hit off Mike Schmidt's glove. Larry Boa then picked it up, and he threw it to first in a close play, where he was ruled safe. There was immediate protest from the Phillies, and a very close play that in replay looks as though he may have just been out. Either way, the game was tied, and 1 batter later, Bill Russell would hit the game-winning single. Steve Carlton would then have to pitch on short rest the next night, and he could not best Tommy John and the Dodgers, as they would win the pennant. That call in Game 3 was debated, but the Phillies did have 2 outs with no one on, and they imploded on a tough play that Mike Schmidt could have made. But that does nothing to stop the complaints. Now we're just going to go ahead and skip forward a few decades to the 2007 wildcard tiebreaker game. Rocktober really begins in Rocktember, as the Rockies won 14 of the last 15 games to force a one-game playoff for the wildcard against the Padres. Wild as expected, things went to extras tied at 6, and the top of the 13th, the Padres would score 2, with real confidence, with Hall of Famer Trevor Hoffman coming into the game. But he was not as usual, as he gave up 3 straight extra base hits to start, which would tie the game. And after an intentional walk to Todd Helton, him and Matt Holliday were on the corners. And on the first pitch he saw, Jamie Carroll hit a line drive to right, and Matt Holliday dashed home, and in a close play, Holliday was ruled safe. And with Michael Barrett losing the ball, it appeared it was the right call. But an opinion especially felt amongst Padre fans and others, it looked as though Holliday didn't touch home plate on his head-first slide. Will always be debated if maybe a fingernail actually got in. Either way, that's how this great game ended. And it led to Rocktober, when the Rockies would make their only World Series appearance. Though it ended with a sweep to the Red Sox, Holliday's slide, that legend says has still not seen him touch home plate, made it all possible. And we moved to a call that could have stopped the longest playoff losing streak in sports. The Twins and Yankees were meeting for the third time in the playoffs that decade in 2009, and the Yankees would take Game 1. And after a game-tying 2-run home run by Alex Rodriguez in the bottom of the 9th, Game 2 would go at extra innings. And to start the 11th, Joe Mauer hit a fly ball down the left field line that would tip off Melky Cabrera's glove in fair territory, then would land in fair territory, but was called a foul ball by Phil Cuzzi. This would have been a ground rule double, but obviously it wasn't. Mauer would end up hitting a single, and the next 2 would also hit singles. Assumably would have drove Mauer in if called correct. But the Twins made nothing of bases loaded, no outs. Then the next inning, Mark Teixeira would hit a walk-off home run. If that call that Phil Cuzzi admitted he missed was called correctly, and the Twins would have ended up winning, then the playoff losing streak would have ended at just 7. But instead, it went all the way to a record 18. And it's easier to just blame it all on Phil Cuzzi. And our next call happened about a week later, also involving the Yankees. The Yankees ended up facing the Angels in the ALCS, and Jeff Mathis would hit a walk-off double in Game 3 for the Angels' first victory in the series. And in Game 4, the Yankees would take a 5-run lead after another 2-run home run from A-Rod. And this call came after Robinson Cano hit a double that put Jorge Posada at third. Nick Swisher would then hit a ground ball to Darren Oliver, who threw home, and put Posada in a rundown, with Cano planning to take third. But for some reason, Cano didn't step on third, and Posada was off the bag. So Mike Napoli tagged Cano, then Posada. But for some reason, only Posada would end up being out, even after conversation. Tim McClellan, who also blew a call on a tag-up earlier, genuinely had no explanation later on an error he admitted to. And there really is no justification. It just genuinely made no sense. It really wasn't that consequential, as Cano didn't score, and the Yankees won 10-1, then they would win the series in 6 games. But this entire game was one of those things that brought instant replay closer to reality. And another play that was huge in allowing instant replay came in a surprising call in 2011 at the end of a marathon. The Braves and Pirates spent late July at Turner Field, and after the Braves scored 3 in the third to tie things, both teams combined scored 0 runs over the next 15 innings. But the Braves rallied in the 19th inning, putting runners on second and third with 1 out. And with the infield in, Scott Proctor hit a ground ball to third baseman Pedro Alvarez, who made a quick and accurate throw home to beat Julio Lugo by plenty, and he looked to be tagged well in front of the plate. But as he popped up and touched home, Jerry Meals called him safe. Genuinely shocking to both sides that one side liked a little more. You can debate that maybe McHenry might have missed him, but the real crime comes from ending a 6-hour and 39-minute game that way. It also looked like this would be the year the Pirates would break the losing season streak that dated back to 1992, but this seemed to be where it all went downhill, as he would finish 18 games under 500. Like Galarraga's near-perfect game in 2010 I talked about in Part 1, this is one of those glaring examples you can look at for the call of instant replay. And some plays have become controversial in the age of replay, such as a fan interference call involving Mookie Betts in 2018. In the ALCS matchup between 200-win teams that definitely had no later controversies attached to them, the Red Sox held a 2-1 lead going into Game 4, and they held a 2-0 lead after the first inning. But it appeared that things might be tied after Jose Altuve hit a deep drive to right. Mookie Betts leaped up to make a catch over the wall and had the ball deflect off his glove, which would have tied the game. But the umpires ruled it was fan interference, and after review, the call was upheld. A lot of the debate was over if he closed his glove before the fans unintentionally did it for him, and if you could just assume he would have caught it. The call being huge, as the Red Sox ended up winning by 2. Then they won the series the next night, in a game where Mookie got a chance to make the same play without interference, which he did, making it appear the assumptions were right on the call the previous night. The Red Sox going on to win the World Series, with the next fan interference call involving Mookie a little more obvious. And the age of replay, something that cannot be reviewed is check swings. with the most controversial one in recent years coming in the 2021 NLCS. The longtime rivals in the Dodgers and Giants spent the playoffs for the first time, and things went to a do-or-die Game 5. And after Cody Bellinger go-ahead double in the ninth, Max Scherzer came out of the bullpen looking to end the series. And after Kris Bryant got on by an error, Lamont Wade would strike out, leaving things up to Wilmer Flores. And he quickly went down 0-2. And on a low slider, Wilmer Flores would check his swing. And on the appeal, it would be ruled that he went around. There is no official definition of a check swing, completely up to the umpire in assessing if an attempt was made or not, but the bat passing the front of the plate and the breaking the wrist is often considered enough. Like an infield fly rule, it's a judgment call and is often controversial like it was here, though it would be hard to see Wilmer Flores doing much against Scherzer. But it really would have been best not in a hard-fought series like this. And for the last one, I'd like to dedicate it to one of the umpires of all time, and Angel Hernandez. Looking at some of his all-time moments, like missing Michael Tucker missing home plate, denying Adam Rosales a game-winning home run, and giving him a double, denying Alex Rios a walk-off fielder's choice, reinventing the check swing and the strike zone, while setting records for the largest strike zone along the way, and putting on an all-time performance in 2018 like Mookie Betts, as in Game 3 of the ALDS, he had 4 of his calls challenged, and he was wrong about 3 of them. Truly a performance that may never be topped from one of the umpires of all time. And make sure to watch part 1 of these videos of controversial calls if you haven't already.